The bell above the shelter door jingled as a man stepped. Inside, the receptionist looked up from her paperwork and smiled, expecting the usual line, "What pupisto you have today?" But instead, the man with the heavy coat and snow-dusted boots said something. "No one had hard before? I'd like to adopt your most unwanted animal," he said firmly. The room fell quiet for a moment, as if the fluorescent lights themselves had paused. "Listen," the receptionist blinked. "I'm sorry. I want the one no one asks, a booth one who's been here the longest. Theon, everyone forgot he didn't asked for a breed or age or temperament he didn't want. A showpiece he wanted, the discarded. He wasn't leaving without it." She hesitated. "You do know this isn't a traditional shelter, right? We're recontracted by Fish and Wildlife. We've get Farrell's Wild Rescues. Not house pets." "I know exactly what I said," he replied, steady. After a long pause, she stewed. "Follow me." They walked past cages lined with curious eyes, rescued raccoon, singered owls, a limping fox with a bandaged paw at the very back behind Aaron Forced gate. With 2 locks, they stopped. Inside was a wire mesh enclosure, tucked away like an afterthought. A single heat lamp buzzed overhead. In the corner lay a bobcat. His coat was patchy. Ear was torn. His left hind leg had a slight tremble, even in sleep. "Huant, sleeping, just pretending to bestle. That's Ash," she said quietly. "Confiscated 2 winters ago from a pocha. Came in half-starved, covered in whence he's not suitable for Relestos. Tolerate people. We haven't had a single inquiry." The man crouched, his knees cracking softly. Ash lifted his eyes, meeting his for the brief second. No growl, no trust either, just silence. "I'll take him," the man said. At the receptionist stared. "Your Sarusha's the one. Came for your going tonade permits, that transport paperwork hand. He can't be kept in a city. I live in Black Hollow," he replied. "Nearest neighbors 5 miles out, already cleared with the state. When I rehabbed that elk last year." The woman folded her arms and exhaled. "All right, Black Hollow, but don't say I didn't warn you." Ash didn't make a sound on the drive back. He stayed low, with crate shoulders tense. When the car slowed near the edge of the forest road, finally stirred, not with interest but discomfort. He hated movement, hated noise, hated being watched. The man Colin Reyna spoke to him occasionally, not in baby talk or commands, just calm narrations. "Knows coming you'll like. That it's quiet where we're headed at home." Ash bolted from the crate the moment Theodore opened and wedged himself under an old workbench in the garage. Didn't eat the first night or the second untethered. He drank half a bowl of water but didn't touch the rabbit meat laid out near his bed. Colin didn't push. He placed food, backed off, and sat across the room reading aloud from books. Passages about winter, survival, forest restoration, old trail journals. On the 5th night, Colin awoke to a strange sound. Claws on floorboards. Ash was pacing near Thundo, not panicked, just moving, observing. The next morning, Colin left garage door cracked open. Ash didn't leave, but he sat by it watching, sensing the wind. That night, he ate most of his food. By the end of the 2nd week, Heck crept into the living room, pressed his booty flat against the wall, eyes scanning every corner. Colin ignored him. Didn't even look up from his coffee. They coexisted in slow, patient rhythms. Noli Ash, no tricks, just quiet offerings. Off space and time. Then, in the 3rd week, Ash brushed against Colin's leg. It wasn't affection. Not really. It wasted sting. Colin didn't flinch. Their breakthrough came on a Tuesday, when the heater failed and the temperature inside dropped near freezing. Colin built a fire in the hearth and laid extra blankets nearby that night. Ash curled on the rug, not close, not touching, but near enough. Share warmth near enough to mean some mething word of Ash spread slowly through the hills. Locals didn't understand why Colin, a reclusive from Maringer, with a history of trauma himself, fouled take and a wounded bobcat. Some called him crazy, others called him kin. Colin didn't care what they called him. 3 months in, Mosh had a routine morning patrol around the tree and resting. Hours curled in the sun patch near the rear windows. Occasional low growls at passing deer, and once a full-throated snarl, and a stranger approached. The property. Colin was incinerating when it happened. He looked opened, saw Ash pressed against the glass-teeth-bared body stiff outside. Stood Eamon with a clipboard. Someone from the poor company. Colin waved him off. Latera knelt beside Ash. "That's the first time you warned me," he said quietly. Ash didn't look away, just blinked slow and steady then. Came the flood of spring, the creeks overflowed, cell towers went out, and one morning news spread through Thea-town of Lidge young Henry Marston. Agenine hadn't come home after school, last seen near the woods walking the long trail home. Search parties formed fast. Helicopters were grounded due to fog. Colin stood at the edge of the force listening. He didn't expect anything. Pawthos did. It began with a low broken winathon. A pace, then a bolt. The Bobcat sprinted from the cabin to Sapper and Ginto. The fog draped woods. Colin followed as fast as his boots would allow. Ash, he called, but the Bobcat didn't slow. His paws barely made sound over the moss and soaked earth. The woods closed in with shadows, but Ash moved like he'd lived there forever. Colin tripped twice, trying to keep up. Finally, they broke through a thicket, and there beside a washed-out ravine was Henry, curled in a shallow pataft, wet leaves. Unconscious lips blue. Ash circled the boy once, then sat just Sadus, if saying this one. Colin radioed in the coordinates. They airlifted Henry out within the hour. He made a full recovery, exposure, and a minor head injury, but nothing permanent. What stayed permanent, though, was the story: Bobots' missing boy. Read the local headline on table: Predator leads rescued a child. People knocked on Colin's door, asked to see Ash. Some offered money. Others wanted interviews. He turned them all away. He's not a story, Colin said. He's a survivor. By midsummer, the town's perception of Ash changed. No longer the meanness in the cage, but the guardian off woods. Someone painted a mural of Hyman, the wall of the general store. Ice fierce body poised, but Ash didn't care. He still hated loud noises. Still vanished for hours when guests visited, but once during a town fundraiser he appeared at the edge of the parking lot, stood for a few minutes, then left. That was enough, the children whispered. Like the scene, a ghost. Colin just smiled. A year later, a new ranger came to Lidge, stopped by Colin's place to introduce herself. She was young, sharp-eyed, with a weather-worn pack slung over her shoulder, and curiosity brimming bent every word as he tamed now. Shisked, as her gaze drifted toward Thebachard. Colin followed her eyes. Ash was-stretched in a long arc of lazy confidence in the last golden patch off sunlight. His amber fur glowed faintly. Ash twitched one ear at a distant crowth. Bobcat's body was larger now, muskily coiled beneath grace, and his coat had taken on the rich, thick sheen of full maturity. His eyes were half-lidded. Booth's senses never dulled. He's not a man, Colin said after a pause. He's free. He just chooses to come back. The ranger smiled politely, but her brow spinched slightly, as if she didn't quite understand that night. As the wind shifted and dark clouds gathered like bruises above the treine, Colin lit the fireplace. The first boom of thunder cracked above the hills, followed by a wash of rain that raced across the roof in wild, uneven bursts. The forest blurt behind streaked windows. Colin leaned forward to stoke the flames, then committee sound. Soft at first, a single padded step, then another. Colin turned toward front window. There he was. Ash the Bobcat stood with his massive frame pressed to the glass, not in fear, not in confusion, but with an eerie, Oka stillness. His gold eyes followed the forks of lightning cutting across the sky. His ears stayed forward, every muscly at rest, yet alert, not afraid, not hiding, just watching. Colin poured 2 cups of Fia like he always did, one for himself, phone for Ash, though Ash never drank it. Hepless. The second cup near the floor by the rug, then eased into his chair. Thealed one with the worn leather arms and woo blanket tossed across the back. Yaukno, he said softly as the storm muttered overhead. They said you were unlovable. Ash didn't move. He didn't need to. He lay down, chin resting on his paws, gaze still locked on the flickering shods outside. A fire crackled low, casting rippling light across the walls and the old wood floors. Somewhere between the silence and the storm, something like peace settled over them both. Time passed like the wind that night. Wrestle sun-seen. Colin spoke no more, neither did Ash, but the fire never dimmed and the rain never let up just past midnight. Ash turned, his head lifted sharply, ears pivoted. A growl rose low, and Gutter Alklin sat upright. What is it, Ash? Didn't answer, but his entire body was alert now. Guys fixed on the woods beyond the edge. The glass. Colin moved to the window, squinting, then he saw it. Lights, not a lig's flashlights, moving deliberately through the trees, 3 of them bright, too bright like searchlights. Slicing through, the dark men moved beneath them, dark figures, rifles slung across halders. Their footsteps muffled by mutant leaves, poachers, or worse, Colin's breath. Caught, he turned. Toward Ash Hoa's already standing, his tail flickered sharply. Then, without a sound, Thebocat slipped toward the back door. Colin moved fast, grabbing the old radioon, the counter fingers shaking as he tuned into the ranger station static. Then, a voice. "This is Ranger 5. Come in, Ranger 5. This is Colin Murray. I've got armed men moving through the east Woodsneer Ridge. Hollow, 3 of them, flashlights and rifles. I think they're looking for something." The reply came swift. "Stay inside. Back up en route, Donut." "Engage." Colin set the radio down, but it was already too late for staying inside. Ash was gone. Colin grabbed his coat, slipped a flashlight into his pocket, and opened the back door. Cold rain slammed into him, but he kept going, boots sinking into the soaked ground. He followed Ash's tracks, barely visible, inth mud down the narrow deer trail that wound along the edge of the ridge. Thuand howled louder, now whipping branches into frenzy. Lightning cracked again, brilliant close, then a scream. Humanklin ran. He found them at the edge of a clearing. One of the men was down, clutching his arm, blood leaking between his fingers. The others stood frozen, weapons raised but shaking across Frampton. Ash stood like something carved from legend, his fur drenched and spiked with rain, his teeth bared. A low warning snarl rumbling deep in his chest. No one moved. Then one of the men shouted, "Back off," and raised his rifle. "No." Clint screamed, throwing himself between them men. Man hesitated, then took aim anyway. A shout rang out. Colin fell. He didn't feel pain right away, just pressure. Anthon cold. He collapsed to his knees, breath ragged, hearing nothing but wind and blood and the faraway ringing off fear. Ash leapt. There was no hesitation, a pause, just claws and fury and something primal unleashed. The man didn't even scream. The rifle hit the mud with a thud, useless now. The others fled, crashing through the woods like terrified children, and Ash didn't follow. Instead, he turned back to Colin, hinged the man's hand, then his chest. Colin gasped. I'm all right," Hugh whispered, though his shirt was already darkening with blood. "You came back." Ash circled him once, then pressed his booty against Colin's side, as if to shield him from the rain. Minutes later, Becca arrived, rangers shouting, boots hutting, light sweeping across the trees. Ash stood unmoved as they approached his body, still and fierce, high-size, wild, but focused. When they tried to come closer, he growled once, a warning, and only stepped aside when Colin reached up and touched his paw. "He's not attacking." Colin rasped, "He saved me." They took Colin to the hospital. He survived. Ash disappeared for 2 weeks after that. The forest felt hollow without him. Colin healed slowly, staring out the window every night during storms, waiting for a silhouette, hoping, but the porch stayed empty until one morning just before dawn. He opened the door and found the second cup of tea knocked over, paw prints in the mud, a squirrel freshly caught left at the steps. Ash didn't need taming. He never had. He just needed someone who saw him clearly and chose him anyway.